Solomon Islands Prime Minister Minister Sogavare has lashed out against Australia in Parliament, accusing it of undermining his government over a security deal with China. The Prime Minister told MPs the Solomons had been threatened with invasion by opponents of its security pact. Be referring to us. Scott Morrison has warned a Chinese base there would be a red line for Australia. Mr Sogavare criticised Australia's attitude towards Solomon Islands as being its backyard. Here he was.
We must do so as an independent sovereign nation, not as a group of black-faced people tucked away in the backyard of some countries, Mr Speaker. Oh, by the way, sir, that term is offensive to us. Very offensive. In custom, backyard is where toilet is. It is where pig and chicken pens are located. It is where rubbish are collected and burned.
Mr Sogavare also singled out Deputy Prime Minister Barnaby Joyce's concern about a little Cuba on Canberra's doorstep, claiming Australian media is trying to equate the situation in the Solomon Islands as the replica of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Let's go to the Solomon Islands now, and joining us live is opposition MP Peter Kenilorea. Peter, there's a bit to pick through right here. So let's just start off with your reaction to some of the language that Sogavare used yesterday.
Yeah, I think that was the day before yesterday. Indeed, it was quite shocking to hear these languages used. I'm sure there are better ways to convey points, particularly to a partner, a strong friend of Solomon Islands. But he chose some very derogatory descriptions to label their relationships, which was quite sad. But I think the history between Sogavare and Australia is quite a long one. So it's just one of those turns now that it's gone to a valley again. You know, it has mountaintops and valleys, and I think in the relations that he has with Australia. So it's a very topsy-turvy kind of relationship that he has with our biggest partner and friend, Australia.
Have you noticed anything in recent weeks, Peter, about Sogavare's language? Is he becoming more irritated? Is he becoming more aggressive? Is there any kind of new trend that you've noticed?
Yes, indeed. I noticed that in the responses to this current issue of the treaty. I think very much irritated. I think the fact that it was leaked is a big concern for him in terms of that particular episode, and the fact that it was leaked from within government by public servants is something that has irked him quite a bit, because there's been leaked documents for the past few months, and yet another one. So I think all of this is very much heightened his rhetoric in terms of what's been happening here in Solomons.
Okay. Let's go to some of the language that has been used by our leaders and get your thoughts on this, sort of turn it around a little bit. Was the red line language used by our Prime Minister divisive? And was the little Cuba quote used by our Deputy Prime Minister as threatening? What are your thoughts on comments made by our leaders?
Yeah, well, I think leaders and politicians, we make comments, in terms of our own contexts. That's just how I see them. When it comes to red lines, these are security concerns and perceptions and threat perceptions that we all have. And I'm sure there are certain intelligence that we don't have for us to see and make a judgment on them. But I'm sure there are intelligence reports out there that do point towards something quite concerning, to make politicians and leaders use languages such as red lines and that. But that is very much a security kind of a term that is used. And I, for one, accept it as it is, in terms of perceptions of a country that feel that their national interest might be threatened, to use those terms.
So are you okay with that language being used over this way?
Oh, yeah. I mean, me personally, I'm okay with language like that being used.
Okay.
I'm okay with languages like backyards being used as well.
Okay, well, that was a point I did want to ask you. Yeah, I mean, did he overreach there by saying that it was offensive to say that Solomon Islands is in Australia's backyard, a place where he says it's a place for toilets and chickens and whatever?
Yeah, well, I don't know many houses these days now that have
No,
that, in
neither
terms
do I.
of the salt context as well. But it's interesting. The term itself has been used, but I see that in the context of the Australian context when it's been used by leaders and politicians in Australia, talking to the Australian audience, using that. I've never heard that being used in a bilateral meeting with Solomon Islands, in terms of when I was in the foreign affairs here. But I understand it being used in the context of an Australian audience. And that is something that I draw a distinction in terms of that.
It
and I
just
don't
refers.
see
I think we all know. Yeah, a backyard refers to proximity as something being close. Just a final one here. Sorry, go, Peter.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I was just going to say that when I visit Australia and I have talks there, I refer to Australia as in our backyard. So I turn it around, which gets a bit of a smile, with the audience.
Have you noticed any changes since the security pact was signed, Peter? I've asked you this in the past. I'll just seek an update here. Has there been any movement with respect to China perhaps coming in, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's people, whether it's police, troops, whatever? Has there been any changes in the past few weeks since we last spoke?
Not directly in terms of physical changes, but of course a few more leaked documents, including the one on aviation that has been leaked, in terms of the communication memorandum of understanding that was signed between our Minister for Aviation and a SOE in China, which is very much linked to the Communist Party as well.
Okay. Solomon Islands Opposition MP Peter Kenilorea, always good to chat to you. Thanks so much for your time. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.